Alright guys, Murph's here. And today I want to talk about a thought exercise, or go over a thought exercise with you guys. Now, for some of you who might be new to the channel, thought exercises are when I pick a situation or scenario, and then I plan out the firearms that I want to use for that scenario. And I've been doing this kind of thing ever since I was a kid. I pick these scenarios, I lay out a couple of limiting factors, and I use that as a method to get me to look at weapon systems or perhaps cartridges that I wouldn't previously have considered without some sort of direction to make me want to look at them. And that's how I've picked up a lot of different information and knowledge throughout the years. So for today's, if you hadn't already caught it from the title, we're going to be talking about the weapon systems that I would use to arm a modern SWAT team. Now, in order to talk about this, we do have to kind of talk about the requirements of a modern SWAT team. What does SWAT do? Well, SWAT, like that's the plural of SWAT. SWAT teams are the tactical arm of law enforcement agencies or departments. And they're utilized in direct action type uses, so raids or barricaded suspects, perhaps hostage situations, things along those lines. They are generally selected from the police department or federal agency from which they work in, and are selected because they're physically fit, technically proficient, all that kind of stuff. Now, what a SWAT team is outfitted with varies wildly based upon where they're at, what their requirements are, and then also what their budget is. And that's probably the most limiting factor overall. A rural sheriff's department's SWAT team would be completely different budget than what FBI HRT has. So with that being the case, we kind of have to outline where it is that this SWAT team is working out of. So let's say that it's a fairly populated area in a city, a larger city, not a big city, not like an LA or an NYPD or New York City. Wow. So many letters. All right, not like New York City or something along those lines, but a fairly decent sized populace, perhaps fifth largest in the state type of deal. And it has a fairly decent budget. Now, I'm not necessarily going to throw out a number for a budget, because when it comes to getting weapon systems for organizations, when you start ordering stuff in bulk, generally prices go down, and that's a hard thing that's a hard thing to account for. And it's not like I have the credibility to be able to call up the firearms manufacturer and ask them what, 35 Ruger AR-556s would cost a police department. I don't think that's necessarily information that they would give me. Now, something else we need to talk about in this is that I am not a police officer. I've never been a police officer or anything like that. But I have a lot of friends who are police officers. I have friends who are on SWAT teams, and I've worked with several different agency SWAT teams. So I have some idea of some equipment and such that they would use. Now, with this being the case, we are just talking about firearms and firearms-related accessories. We're not going into body armor or holsters, radios, any of that kind of stuff. Outside of the purview of this video, we're just talking about firearms and all that kind of stuff. All right? So, what were my limiting factors and what it was that I was going to look at today? So I decided to go off of only manufacturers that had referenceable law enforcement programs, stuff that I could actually look through and see what it was that they had available on law enforcement pricing. Not necessarily able to see the price, but at the very least able to see what was being offered so that I can make my decisions from those brochures. That was how I made the decisions that I made. Now, price, since I don't have a budget, is not necessarily the end-all be-all option that I was going after, but I did want to pick things that were not necessarily the most costly or the cheapest. I was looking for something kind of middle ground overall. All right, now that's enough of the preamble here. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of this. Let's start out with the rifle that the SWAT teams are going to be using. I want to go with the rifle caliber, because if I'm going into a fight, I want to bring a rifle caliber anytime that I can. And I wanted to look at something in a short-barreled rifle, so like a 11.5 inch to a 13.5, something in that range. And I want to look at a 5.56. Now, Might be asking yourself, why 5.56? And I'll tell you. So, in an 11.5 to 13.5 inch gun, at the distances that a SWAT team is commonly going to engage, which are going to be well under 150 yards, the 5.56 is perfectly capable. Also, having a shorter overall length makes it easier for the teams to be able to maneuver in close quarters type scenarios. Should they be moving through, I don't know, a house or apartment complex, something along those lines. In addition to that, going with a shorter barrel allows me to be able to attach suppressors without getting a ridiculously oversized gun. Adding a suppressor, 6-inch suppressor to an 11.5 inch gun as opposed to a 20-inch gun is a pretty drastic difference there. And I would like these guys to be able to run suppressed. Not that they have to run suppressed, so it's going to be some sort of standard that they always run suppressed, but that they have the option or the capability available. Now, why 5.56 over other cartridges? The 6.5 and 6.8 and 300 Blackout are all very interesting cartridges, and they have their own little places that they fill in exceedingly well. However, they are not do-all cartridges. 6.5 and 6.8 would be fantastic options if I had to reach out to, say, 300 consistently, or perhaps I was dealing with closer range, like body armor issues. That would make 6.5, 6.8 stand out more in my esteem. Not necessarily applicable in this case, or outside of the realm of possibility, I guess you could say, but what it really comes down to is the issue that I'm going to outline with all three, but specifically 300 Blackout, is cost. The idea of a SWAT team is that these guys have tons of time to train with each other, that they have tons of time out on the range perfecting their craft, and live fire practice is the best way to do that. There's lots of other dry fire type techniques and UTM rounds and all that kind of stuff that you can utilize as well, but nothing replaces live fire. So selecting a cartridge that is fairly cheap and would keep those guys out on the range for an extended period of time or more frequently is obviously a better overall option in this case. So sticking with the 5.56. Now the rifle, well, one more thing I want to outline about the rifle is that I wanted to go with an external gas piston, AR-15 or similar variant. Now, this is not a direct gas impingement versus external gas impingement debate, but external gas piston, when combined with short-barreled rifles and suppressors, is the better gas system. It's not like direct gas impingement guns don't work in that matter, but it's better longevity, it's more reliable system, and especially when agencies should be concerned about how often their guns are going to go down, especially with a high round count unit, or the probability of parts breakage, it's probably better to go with something that's going to be a little more long lasting in that regard. That way you don't have to replace parts nearly as often. Once again, guys, things that I might be fine with consistently doing, with swapping out parts or different cartridges and all that kind of stuff, things that I would be fine with supplying myself, when you times that by however many people are on a SWAT team, that may not be the best outcome price-wise. So with that being the case, what I wound up selecting was the SIG MCX TAP in an 11.5 inch barrel. Now I picked this for a couple of reasons. External gas piston, obviously. It's an AR-15 variant, but it has the same functionality. It has the same layout of parts, and also has ambidextrous capability, which would be fantastic if we're talking about bringing in a wide variety of people, right? So for the most part, these guys are going to be selected because they're kind of the cream of the crop, right? That's supposed to be the whole idea here. But that doesn't mean that we still don't need to work around what they're used to. So selecting an AR-15 variant is good. The overall layout of, the features and controls and all that kind of stuff is going to be something that they're used to. Then we can optimize it a little bit instead of them having to change out a bunch of parts to make the rifle work for them. By it being ambidextrous, there's a higher probability that it'll work with every person who comes to the team. Just some of the things that I'm looking at there. Now, in addition to that, when you look at SIG right now, that is a powerhouse of a company. They can offer you a suppressor, optic, rifle, and ammunition all in one go. All from one manufacturer. That's fantastic. So now, starting out with SIG has now become the person to beat. That's That's who, as we go through the rest of this list that I've selected, we have to figure out what options on the market beat out the ones from SIG. Now, one of the issues that I have with SIG is that SIG here recently has had a tendency to use the public as their test and development phase instead of wringing out issues in the manufacturing process prior to sending them out the door. The 320, the 365, currently the SIG Cross precision rifle. These all are having issues right now that should have already been addressed in the development process. So just because we went with SIG on this one rifle that's already had near 10 years of experience in order to be able to have a lot of its issues figured out and fixed, it's not a guarantee that we're going to go all SIG, is the end state here. That's what I'm getting at. So MCX, first off, 5.56, I think it'd be a pretty decent option. And I have seen a couple of SWAT teams running SIG MCXs. Now, optic-wise, what I decided to go with was the SIG Romeo 8 Hotel, or H. And this is kind of their EOTech type offering. It has a wider field of view than a lot of their more rounded collimator sights. And it's a holographic display. It has 4 different reticle settings. It has single dot, a stacked 3 or 4 dot configuration for distance, a circle dot, and then a circle stacked dot configuration. And this is one of those things, I like the adaptability aspect of it. So for myself and my own systems, I love red dots. And I don't mind single red dots. There's still a lot of data that I can work off of there, and ultimately in close range type fighting, I want to have the minimum amount of information to work off of so that it's not to confuse the eye. I want to be able to just work off of a dot. It's a known variable that I can work around. I understand how to work around it, and I like using that for its simplicity. However, a circle dot reticle gives you a little bit more information, which can be helpful and is not obtrusive to the eye. It's not something that's going to be distracting or confusing in the heat of the moment. So I do see the value of circle dots, and since we already started out with SIG, why not keep it going with the Optic? Now, let's talk about lights. So I presently am a huge fan of the Surefire M300 Scout type setup. I have M300s and M600s in personal and professional use right now, and one of the things that I really like about the M300 is that it's nice and short. I still have a massive amount of lumens, and I have a night vision setting, which works excellent. It has great output. It works wonderful under Mpgs, and I would like these guys to have Mpgs available to them. So that could be that's pretty helpful right there. I've been using one for the last year professionally, and I absolutely love it. Now, so laser designators for use with Mpgs. Now, this is one area where unfortunately I have to kind of lean on my own personal experience, which is all professional with these systems. And I know there's a lot more options out on the market now, but what I'm primarily looking at, having had experience with, are the PEC2s, the PEC15s, and the PEC15 Alpha, also known as the D-Ball. And right now, professionally, I'm running a D-Ball. And one of the things that I like about the D-Ball is that it has a small, compact configuration that doesn't take up a lot of rail space, and I appreciate that. The PEC15 is lightweight itself, but it's kind of large and obtrusive. And also the D-Ball has some really great outputs, slightly better than what you get on the regular PEC15. So, I know I think Steiner has an offering out there, and there's a couple other manufacturers that have IR designators for rifles, but I'm kind of going with what I know on this one. Now, sling-wise, we're going to go with a Larry Vickers adjustable 2-point sling. Fantastic slings. Excellent, especially for somebody whose only function around the rifle is not just to run the rifle. So you can adjust it, how tight it is attached to you. So if you have to go hands-on with something, arresting somebody, or perhaps setting up for a breach, you can tighten up that sling, hold it close to your body, and then be able to do whatever it is you need to do with your hands, and then loosen that sling back up so that you can transition shoulders and all that kind of stuff should the situation require it. I really appreciate that adaptability, and that's something that I would definitely want to have afforded to me as a SWAT team member. All right, let's talk about shotguns real quick. Now, from what I understand, vast majority of SWAT teams, or at least a good number of SWAT teams, are not really running shotguns in an offensive type measure as much as they're using them for breaching. And SWAT has a wide variety of manners that it can breach, and I would definitely like to see this SWAT team outfitted with all of the possibilities, including a shotgun. So for this, since it's not a primary weapon as much as it's a tool, I selected a Mossberg 500 pistol grip shotgun. So this way, you can throw it down in some sort of scabbard or something along those lines, employ it when it's needed, and then tuck it back away and get back to your primary rifle in order to get to work. Now, something I did forget to throw out about the primary rifle is that we will be utilizing the SIG suppressor that's capable of running with 5.56, so rolling an image of that right now. Now, let's talk about the precision rifle setup, because every SWAT team needs a sniper, right? All SWAT teams need multiple precision marksmen. And this was actually kind of difficult because, especially being limited to just what a manufacturer claims they have available for law enforcement, kind of made finding a good rifle for this very difficult. So a couple things we need to look at. The actual engagement distances for SWAT snipers. Now, a lot of this is going to be based upon region. If you ask a room full of SWAT snipers what the average engagement distance is, they'll tell you 70 yards. However, if you go to the ASA, the American Sniper Association, that's what it is, American Sniper Association, they did a comprehensive study on SWAT sniper involved shootings and found that the average distance was actually 51 meters. Now, there's some wide variance there, much closer shots and then also much further shots, but the average was 51. And a lot of that, again, is going to depend on your region. So in the area that I live now, I would be surprised to see a shot being taken over 175 yards away. Still not very far. That is exceedingly close. It's something you can pull off with iron sights, no problem. However, the shooting conditions might be far more complicated than what the average shooter is concerned with. So accuracy is definitely paramount. Now, the issue with any rifle review you see anywhere, print media, YouTube, doesn't matter, everyone will tell you that the gun, whatever gun it is that they're looking at, apparently every rifle on the market is sub-MOA, is sub-MOA. And it's really annoying because actual practical accuracy, not a ridiculously overpowered magnified optic and, cherry-picked groups and all that kind of stuff don't really tell you what the story of a rifle is. Now, what I wound up having to do was look through a bunch of different reviews and pick some items, figure out what the average result for accuracy was, and what I wound up going with, after a lengthy amount of research, was the SIG 716 Gen 2 DMR in 308. This rifle consistently pulls off at least one MOA, which is perfectly acceptable in this case. Now, myself, guys, generally, I'm completely fine with minute-of-man shooting. That's all that I have a requirement personally for. However, in this case, holding to a higher standard like one MOA is definitely critical. Now, the optic to go along with this will be a SIG Whiskey 5 3-18 with their super fancy reticle that they have. I'll roll in a couple of pictures of this at this point. It's a pretty nice scope, as I understand it. It is extremely adaptable and has crisp adjustments, all that kind of stuff. It seems to be a fairly decent scope. And I'm sure that there's plenty of better offerings out there, but once again, from a packaging standpoint, getting it from SIG is pretty advantageous. All right, so we have, let's see, Designated Marksman's Rifle, the actual hard-working rifle, and our shotgun. Let's go ahead and talk about our pistol. Now, for the vast majority of law enforcement agencies out in the United States, at least, SWAT guys are part-timers. They walk a regular patrol beat and all that kind of stuff. They have their equipment in the trunk of the car, and then if something goes down, they get a call, they establish a rally point, and they meet up, They throw all their stuff on, they go do whatever it is they need to go do. These guys are not sitting in a ready room, fully decked out, chomping at the bit for a call. That's not reality. There might be some organizations that are like that, but it's not all organizations. So with that being the case, the majority of SWAT teams will opt to running whatever sidearm is already standard issue or standard for the department. So here, basing it off of this hypothetical situation, hypothetical 5th largest city in the state, that would be the Glock 19. But I want to adjust it just a little bit and have it be the Glock 19 MOS. And this is specifically because, maybe not as a standard, but I would like for these guys to have the opportunity to put an RMR on their pistols. Specifically because, in general, I'm pretty sure red dot equipped pistols are the future. Like I think we've more or less proven that at this point, and the technology is only getting better by the day. And having shot, so I don't own anything that's dot equipped, but having shot quite a few dot equipped pistols and run through a couple of different drills with them and stuff like that, they're nice. They are extremely nice once you figure out how to line up with them. And there's a couple of ways to go around that, and that's probably a discussion all on its own. However, a Glock 19 MOS, some suppressor height sights, and let's say make it a standard of a Trichicon RMR, I think we've got a pretty good setup right there. Those have been well renowned for being durable and reliable sights. And I mean, Glocks are steadfast, reliable. You guys know that I'm a huge Glock fan in general, if you've really spent any time on this channel. And it doesn't really, like, I wanted to try to pick things that weren't necessarily run-of-the-mill, but in this case, I mean, it was just easier to go based off of what the local police department uses instead of trying to, like, hash it out back and forth in a bunch of different directions. How I would outfit a police department is a completely different video that maybe we'll do in the future if there's any interest. Now, with that being the case, I would like the pistols to be light equipped, of course, because lights are important. And for that, I would like to stick with Surefire for the X300 Ultra. It's an excellent light, excellent output, great lumens. My only issue in general with Surefires is that they really drain battery, but these guys aren't operating for days on end where they're going to have to carry a bunch of batteries with them in order to be able to keep, you know, their weapons up and running. Direct action. Firehouse type response, direct action type incidents. They'll have plenty of time to make sure that they have fresh batteries in their stuff. And they'll have plenty of time to replace any battery should they need to. Like, they'll have the resources. All right, guys, I actually managed to roll through this really fast. I had this filmed previously, but it was about 40 minutes long, and I managed to trim down a lot of the discussion, kind of streamline a lot of the processes here, and got us something in about half the time. So I hope you guys found this interesting. I would love to hear y'all's input on these selections specifically. It would be fairly interesting to hear what you guys have that you would throw out maybe a little bit differently. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. So, with that being the case, that's what I got. Have a good day.